In the house decorated with Christmas decorations, and with the smell of cinnamon in the air, Ethan began his meeting around the Christmas tree. Before we start, I want to invite you to subscribe to the channel and activate the little bell so you don't miss any of the content. He held a cup of hot tea as he watched the friends and family who had accepted his invitation for that special evening. Everyone knew that Ethan had something important to share, but no one knew exactly what. I want to start by talking about something that many consider simple, but which is deeply significant, said Ethan, holding his hand in front of the fireplace. This little cross on my wrist, which I've carried since birth, is more than just a sign. It's a reminder of protection and faith. He looked at Lily, who had a similar cross on the back of her neck, visible only when she pinned up her hair. She touched the spot instinctively. I've always found it curious to have that mark, she said. My grandmother used to say it was a gift from God. Ethan nodded, and she was right. The cross is one of the most powerful symbols we carry on our skin and in our souls. In Christianity, it represents the sacrifice of Jesus and the redemption of humanity. When you carry a cross as a birthmark, it's a constant reminder that you've been chosen for something greater. Lily seemed moved. But what does that mean in practice? How can it be a calling? Ethan explained with his characteristic calm. Those who bear the mark of the cross usually possess unshakable strength in times of adversity. They are like beacons of hope, called to lead by example and spread Christ's love and compassion. Think of every difficulty you've faced, and how somehow you've always found the strength to carry on. That cross is your anchor. He told the story of a man called Thomas, who also had a cross marked on his skin. Thomas had faced countless challenges in his life, from the early loss of his parents to financial battles that seemed insurmountable. But he never gave up, said Ethan. Thomas knew that his cross was more than a drawing. It was a symbol that God was by his side, guiding him through even the darkest moments. Lily wiped away a stubborn tear. I always felt I had a greater responsibility, but I never knew why. And now you know, replied Ethan. Your mark is a reminder that even when all seems lost, there is a greater force watching over you. And more than that, it's a call to be that force for others. He continued. People with the mark of the cross are often called to lead, to offer spiritual support, and to bring consolation. You may not be a preacher or a missionary, but your life, your actions, and your words can be the cross that someone needs to carry to find redemption. That night, Lily realized that her mark wasn't just a coincidence, but a divine gift that connected her to something greater. Ethan, for his part, looked around and saw in the faces of those present a new light, an understanding that their physical signs were much more than marks on the skin. Now, said Ethan with a smile, let's talk about another mark that also carries extraordinary meaning. With the fireplace crackling softly and the Christmas tree lights twinkling, Ethan straightened his glasses and continued his talk. He knew that each mark told a story, and that night, he was helping his friends to understand how special they were. After talking about the cross, he turned his attention to the star. Now, I want to talk about something that has always fascinated me. The stars, he began. Do you know why the Star of Bethlehem is such an important symbol at Christmas? Because it guided the Magi to Jesus. And just like that star, some people carry marks that make them guides in this world. He looked at David, a shy young man who was sitting by the window. David, you have a mark on your shoulder in the shape of a star, don't you? David smiled, a little sheepishly. Yeah, I always thought it looked like a star, but I never really thought about it. Well, said Ethan, that mark isn't just a coincidence. Anyone who carries a star on their skin has a special calling, to be a light for others. You are a source of hope and inspiration, even if you don't always realize it. He continued, think of the function of a star in the night sky. It illuminates the darkness and serves as a point of reference for lost travelers. Those with the mark of the star have a similar role. You are called to guide, to bring clarity, and to remind people that there is something greater beyond what they can see. David frowned, reflecting. That makes sense, he said hesitantly. Often, friends and family come to me for advice, even when I don't feel qualified to help. They say that my presence calms them down. Ethan nodded. That's your star shining. You don't need to have all the answers. Sometimes just being there is enough to bring comfort and direction. Your mark doesn't mean you're perfect, but that you have a special gift to light the way for those who are in doubt or suffering. He told the story of Clara, a woman who also had a star-shaped mark on her hand. Clara went through great difficulties, but she never lost her ability to smile and encourage others. When people in her community were discouraged, it was she who organized meetings, gave motivational speeches, and helped everyone see the light at the end of the tunnel. Her mark was the constant reminder that she had been chosen to lead. Ethan looked at David again. You're like Clara, David. Even when you don't realize it, your light is shining. Every gesture of kindness, every word of encouragement you offer, is like a star in the sky, guiding someone to a better place. The young man nodded, visibly touched. I never thought of my brand like that, he admitted. But now I see that maybe it has a purpose. Ethan smiled. And that's what we're discovering here today. These marks are not mere accidents. They have deep meanings, and they help us understand who we are and what our role in this world is. Now, he said, settling into his chair, let's talk about the next brand and what it represents. As those present absorbed Ethan's words about the star, he turned his attention to another mark with a deep spiritual connection. Picking up a small goldfish ornament from the tree, he held it up to the firelight and began. The fish is one of the oldest symbols in Christianity, he said. And when it appears as a birthmark, it's a powerful sign that you've been called to something special, to be a messenger of the faith. Rachel, who was sitting next to David, stirred restlessly. I have a mark that looks like a fish on my back, she said. I always thought it was funny, but I never thought it could have any meaning. Ethan smiled at her. Ah, Rachel, your mark isn't there by chance. Did you know that, in the early days of Christianity, the followers of Jesus used the symbol of the fish to identify themselves in secret? The word ichthys, which means fish in Greek, was an acronym for Jesus Christ, Son of God, Savior. This symbol was a reminder of their faith, even in times of persecution. Rachel looked surprised. So what does it mean to me? It means that you have been chosen to be a bearer of faith, Ethan explained. Just as the first Christians spread the message of Jesus, those with the mark of the fish have a natural gift for inspiring others to find their connection with the divine. He told the story of Jonah, the prophet who was called by God to preach in Nineveh, but tried to run away from his mission. God sent a great fish to swallow Jonah, not as a punishment, but as a way of redirecting him towards his purpose. Like Jonah, you can feel that you are being called to something greater, even if you don't always know what it is. Rachel reflected. Now that I think about it, friends and family often come to me to talk about spiritual issues or ask for guidance, even if I'm not the most religious person. That's part of your calling, said Ethan. Your mark is a reminder that you have the gift of feeding the souls of others, just as the fish fed the crowds in Jesus' miracle. It doesn't have to be in grand gestures. Sometimes a sincere conversation or a simple act of kindness is enough to plant a seed of faith. He looked around the room and continued. If you have this mark, it also means that you are being guided on your own spiritual journey. The fish represents nourishment, both physical and spiritual. Those with this mark often find themselves in positions where they can offer support, hope, and love to those around them. Ethan paused, allowing his words to echo. Rachel, your mark is a gift. It's a reminder that, just as Jesus' disciples were called to be fishers of men, you too have been chosen to bring light and faith into people's lives. Rachel smiled, still absorbing the weight of the words. Rachel smiled, still absorbing the weight of the words. I never thought of it like that, she said. Maybe my brand really does have a greater purpose. It certainly does, said Ethan. And now, let's find out what the next brand can reveal about who we are. With everyone's attention, Ethan smiled gently before continuing. He picked up a delicate dove-shaped ornament from the Christmas tree and held it in front of the group. The next birthmark we'll discuss is the dove, he said. This mark, like the dove itself, carries a deep and universal meaning: peace, love, and reconciliation. He turned to Emily, a reserved young woman who was sitting near the piano, gazing thoughtfully into the fire. Emily, he said carefully, I remember you mentioned having a mark that resembles a dove on your ankle. Would you like to share something about that? Emily smiled, but seemed hesitant. I always thought it was just a peculiar mark, she admitted. But sometimes I feel I'm drawn to resolving conflicts, whether it's between friends or in my family. Ethan nodded. That makes perfect sense. Those with the mark of the dove often carry a special calling to be peacemakers. In the Bible, the dove appears as a symbol of peace, as in the story of Noah, when the dove returned with an olive branch, signaling the end of the flood and the beginning of a new era. He looked at the others as he continued. This mark is more than just a sign on the skin. It's a reminder that you were chosen to bring harmony in the midst of chaos, to be a force for reconciliation in a divided world. It's not an easy task, but it's a rare gift. Ethan paused and moved closer to Emily. Have you ever noticed how people often come to you for advice or to mediate disagreements? Emily laughed softly. Yes, actually, it happens all the time. I thought it was just because I'm a good listener. It is, replied Ethan. But it's also more than that. Your brand represents your ability to create bridges where there are divisions, to bring calm where there is storm. Just as the dove is the symbol of the Holy Spirit, its presence can inspire confidence and serenity. He shared a story about a friend who also had a dove-shaped mark. James was always the mediator in the group. In a community full of heated debates, he could find words that calmed tempers and brought clarity. His mark was a constant reminder of his role as a peacemaker. Emily seemed to absorb every word. I never thought of my mark as something spiritual, she said softly. But I guess I always felt that my role was to help people understand each other. Ethan smiled. And that's exactly what peacemakers do. Your brand isn't just a symbol. It's an invitation to live a life of love, compassion, and reconciliation. The world needs more people like you, Emily. He looked around the room. If any of you have a dove mark or feel this calling, remember, you have been chosen to bring peace and hope. Never underestimate the impact of a kind word or a compassionate gesture. He stood up and put the ornament back on the tree. Now, he said, let's talk about the next mark and what it represents for those who carry it. Ethan picked up a small Christmas tree ornament, decorated with shiny gold leaves, and held it in front of the group. Now let's talk about the tree, he began, his voice low and reverent. A tree-shaped mark is not just a sign of beauty. It represents growth, strength, resilience, and the deep connection with the divine and those around us. He paused, looking at Jackson, a middle-aged man who was sitting quietly by the window. Jackson had a calm presence, but there was something in his eyes that suggested a life of challenges and victories. "Jackson," said Ethan with a warm tone, "you mentioned a twig-shaped mark on your shoulder blade. Can you tell us a bit about how that relates to your life?" Jackson sighed, looking down at his hands for a moment before speaking. "Growing up was complicated," he began. "My father was absent, and my mother struggled to support us. I always felt like a lone tree trying to grow in the midst of a constant storm. But somehow, I always found the strength to keep going, even when it seemed like nothing around me helped." Ethan nodded. "That's exactly what the mark of the tree symbolizes," he said. "In the Bible, the tree is often mentioned as a sign of life and prosperity. Psalms tells us of the tree planted by the waters, whose deep roots make it resilient even during adversity. This is the essence of the mark of the tree, continuous growth, even in difficult terrain." He looked around the group, making sure everyone was following. Those with the mark of the tree are often pillars in their communities. Just as a tree provides shade and fruit for those around it, you have the ability to nurture, protect, and inspire. Your strength comes not from the absence of challenges, but from the ability to face storms and flourish in spite of them. Ethan turned to Jackson again. "Have you noticed how people often come to you for advice or strength? How your presence seems to offer stability, even when you yourself may be facing difficulties?" Jackson nodded slowly. "Yes," he said thoughtfully. "I've never thought of it like that, but people say I'm the strong guy in the group. Even when I'm struggling, I feel a responsibility to be there for them." "That's because your brand is more than physical," said Ethan. "It's a reflection of your spirit. Just like a tree that grows slowly over the years, you've developed deep roots and a resilience that can't be easily shaken. Your mark is a reminder that you have been called to be a point of support, not only for yourself, but for others." Ethan pointed to the tree-shaped ornament. "Just as trees go through seasons, spring, summer, fall, winter, we too face changes and challenges. And each season, even the most difficult ones, contributes to our growth. Your mark, Jackson, is a reminder that you are rooted in something much bigger than yourself, and that gives you the strength to face anything." He looked at the others, observing their thoughtful expressions. "If any of you have a tree-shaped mark, or feel a connection with this symbol, remember, you were called to grow, no matter how difficult the circumstances. You are like trees in a forest, connected by invisible roots, offering support to each other, even when you don't realize it." Ethan put the bauble back on the Christmas tree and paused, allowing the moment to settle. "And now," he said, "let's talk about the next brand, one that glows like fire itself." Ethan held up a small flame-shaped ornament, shimmering with gold and red hues. "The flame," he began, "is a symbol of passion, transformation, and spiritual energy. If you have a flame-shaped birthmark, it indicates that you have been called to bring light and renewal to the world." Ethan stood up and looked at everyone, his warm smile reflecting the light of the surrounding candles. "Do you see now how every mark, every detail of who you are, has a purpose? These are not just physical or symbolic marks. They are reminders that each of you carries a unique light, a special mission that the world needs." He paused, his voice taking on an even deeper tone. "If you identify with these marks, know that you are not alone. Each of us has been called, in one way or another, to something greater. And it's important that we believe in our purpose, even when it seems uncertain." Ethan looked at Charlotte, at Liam, at the others, and then concluded, I want to invite each of you, and anyone listening to this message, to explore your spiritual journey with the Chosen Devotional. It's 40 days of reflection and preparation that can help you strengthen your connection with the divine and understand the true purpose behind who you are. He stepped forward, looking directly into the camera that was broadcasting the meeting for those who couldn't be there. And if you're watching, share with us in the comments which brand resonated with you the most. Let's build this community of support, love, and growth together. Believe me, you're more special than you think. And then, as if ending an intimate conversation with old friends, Ethan smiled. I'm George, your guide and friend on this spiritual journey. Thank you for trusting me to help you find your way. Peace, light, and until next time.